Mystery solved. Next problem. The Middle East.
No, I have a marker. And it was so good. It wound up with everything. I was laughing at them. It was like
What class?
social change.
You just
Yes.
can't hear that well.
Kayla Cheney, Mason Cook,
Yeah.
Soren I saw, Hannah, Riley, Brody, yep. Emma, Wally, Gracie, Grace Hayes, Grace,
Who's your dad?
Oh.
Says my last name.
Kayla Herta,
Yeah.
Grace Kielson, Brady Cumlin, Zach Lustig, Zach,
He does yoga with the gay person.
Dawson Monty, yeah. Jack, yep.
Yeah.
Wow, there's a lot of people.
There's a lot of retrieving. Can't use the same one.
I will try to be brief. We do have a certain amount of material that I got to cover, but then the rest of the hour is for you to, again, make sure that you have mastered the document that you were responsible for. And if you want to meet again with your fellow numbered people, that's fine. Also in your little universe is, wow, there is a Kia due, and technically it's due like a minute ago, but you have the hour to work on that. And then here's a crazy idea. Work ahead. Work ahead. How about that? Right? Because later on, they become 2 Kia assignments. So if you have the opportunity, attack now. And then also in your little universe, although I haven't really emphasized it yet, but you do have to find your own quote for the second essay. Some credible primary or secondary quote from someone of note. Now, this would probably be a historian, but it doesn't have to be. It can be someone famous or whatever that has something to say about free speech, a la Sedition Act, or federalism, a la should states have the right to nullify national laws, federal laws, or what was the third issue? Taxes. And good God, that's simple to find somebody commenting on taxes, the role of the federal government versus state governments, the idea of free speech. And the quote could be even a synthesis quote, right? You don't even have to find the quote about the time frame we're talking about. It could be about free speech during World War II. By the way, you'll note in American history, big idea right now, big idea in history, and that is this. During a war, it's interesting because it's at the same time that rights are granted, that rights are taken away. So it is during World War II that women are seen to be working outside the home, and men are like, oh, they can't work. But at the same time, Japanese are put in internment camps. So it is interesting that during conflict, rights are taken away, and yet rights are also granted. The irony of that. So if you're familiar with CIRS, that's a great place to start. How many of you are not? This CIRS thing you've never heard of. Okay. It's fantastic. Yes, I see. Your hand is in the air. Or you're a very slow Nazi. Great place to start. Also, since you are U of M students, you have access to the U of M library. It's not as user-friendly as CIRS, though. So I would actually recommend CIRS at first. So I will show you. All right. During the writing of the Constitution, during the Constitutional Convention, one of the concerns was the mob. I don't know if this is news to you, but we are not a democracy. No, we're not. We are not a democracy. Yes? Everything okay?
Yeah.
We are a constitutional republic. We are not even purely a republic. A democracy is where we make the decisions, but we don't. We choose the people that make the decisions. But that's not even exactly right, because let's say that we elect leaders. Can they do whatever they want? No, because we have this annoying thing called the Constitution, which limits their choices. So we are a constitutional republic. And that was intentional. It was intentional that the writers of the Constitution wrote it that way because they were afraid of democracy. Democracy is ugly. In democracies, you pick candidate Candy, not candidate Broccoli. Candidate Broccoli says, vote for me, you'll eat broccoli. And candidate Candy says, vote for me, Candy. And if we allow the mob to make their choice, we're going to have President Candy. So what do? We put into place mechanisms to make sure that the mob is listened to, but ultimately not necessarily required to go along with the mob. And what I'm talking about are examples of protecting the country from the majority. We have in place mechanisms, tools that protect the minority from the majority. So I've got a few examples here. These are examples where the will of the few trumps the will of the many. The will of the few trumps the will of the many. Like, for example, judges. A judge. Now, I'm not talking about in a murder trial. Although that's another example, actually, a jury trial. In a jury trial, let's say you have 12 jurors. If you have 12 jurors and 10 say guilty and 2 say not guilty, what's the verdict? Well, that's not actually true. It's not guilty, but it isn't guilty. It's a non-verdict. It's a hung jury. We failed to reach a verdict. The way you are found not guilty is if all 12 say not guilty. But do you understand then, right? If it takes all 12, that means it only takes one to muck it up. That's protecting the minority from the majority. A federal judge, I'm talking about in big cases where like Ford is being sued, or the Environmental Protection Agency is accused of not really cleaning the environment. A judge can make a ruling. Within the past year, a judge in Texas ruled that the way Texas has broken up its voting districts is unconstitutional. One judge. That's protecting the minority from the majority, right? The Electoral College. I mean, has it ever happened where somebody loses the popular vote but wins? Yeah, we just had it, right? That's an example. The Electoral College chooses the president. We do not popularly elect our presidents. And the reason is because in our country, it is states that choose the president as reflected by the Electoral College. It is not the popular vote. If you have concerns that's stupid, right? We should have the popular vote. Just one thing to consider is if our nation went with the popular vote, I believe that candidates running for president would spend about 3 seconds in Wisconsin. Why bother? No one lives here. They would spend all their time on the coasts. They might spend a little bit of time in like Illinois because there's a big city there. But we're flyover country here. But because of the Electoral College, Wisconsin has, I think, 10 electoral votes. That's significant. Minnesota has 10 electoral votes. You put them together, that's 20 electoral votes. That is a greater portion of the Electoral College than the popular vote in Wisconsin. Yes, dear.
What's the point of us voting?
Very good question. The popular vote dictates which party gets to name the people in the Electoral College. So, for example, Trump won the popular vote in Wisconsin. What that meant was the Republicans got to pick which 10 people would vote in the Electoral College. So the popular vote does matter.
Got it.
Great. Okay, a couple other things. the Supreme Court. Think about the fact that the Supreme Court, the belief is that the Supreme Court is going to, if not overturn Roe v. Wade, at least going to address it. That's 5 people. 5 people in a nation of 350 million. 5 people get to decide the legality of abortion. 5. Right? That's the minority trumping the majority. Okay? And if you want to simplify the understanding of, well, why don't we just go with the majority? Because the majority is the mob. Because the majority wants candy, not broccoli. The majority wants what feels good now. But the elites, the educated, the judges, the electoral college, they know we need broccoli. So it's good for you, damn it. And when I say damn, I'm not swearing. I mean D-A-M, build a dam, damn it. Hold the water back. So I'm not swearing. Ding. Okay. There are many others, many others. Anyone know what does it take in the Senate? What does it take to ratify a treaty? Right? We ended World War II. We signed a treaty. Does anyone know what the vote is to ratify that treaty? It's 3/4. It takes 3/4 of the Senate. So there are 100 senators. That means 75 senators need to say, yep, let's go with the treaty. But don't you understand what that means? It means it only takes 26 senators to say no. 74 say, let's go with it. 26 say, let's not. And the answer is not. Because 26 get their wish over 74. That's an example. If it were a really good treaty, more than 74 would vote for it. There must be something wrong with it. That's the idea. Right? If it's really good for you, if it's broccoli, then a significant number over a simple majority would go for it. Okay? And our Constitution is full of this stuff. Full of this stuff. Okay, any questions? Let's keep going. So they write this beautiful Constitution with 3 branches, a judicial branch, an executive branch, a legislative branch. And it's got all these rules, and you studied it in civics, so we're not going to restudy the Constitution. But they needed 9 of the 13 states to ratify it. When 9 of the 13 ratify, which by the way is another example of protecting the minority from the majority. Why didn't they just go with 7? 7 is a majority of 13. Why didn't they go with 7? They went with 9. Just to make sure that this is a well-supported document, we're going to go with 9, not 13. Okay? And you can see the first state. Here's a fun little test question. Which state was the first to ratify the Constitution? It was Delaware. In fact, any of you collect those quarters when you were younger, state quarters? I believe that's what it says on the back. Delaware, the first state. It was the first state to ratify the Constitution. All right, so Pennsylvania, New Jersey, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, that's not. Oh, yeah. But what I'm showing you is this. At the time, the 2 biggest states were Virginia and New York. They were the 2 states that you needed. Even if you already had 9, you still needed these 2. I mean, you look at the first several presidents, they're all from Virginia and New York. All of them. Everyone's from Virginia and New York. So they needed these 2, right? And a group supporting the new Constitution called themselves the Federalists. And a group opposing the Constitution called themselves the Non-Federalists. And among the Non-Federalists was this guy named Thomas Jefferson. There's a fun little fact. Thomas Jefferson did not even support the U.S. Constitution. And later on, he became president because of it. Sort of ironic, right? This group would later on change their name to Democratic Republicans. 3 of the documents that you've been given were written by Federalists in support of a stronger central government, the Federalist way, a strong central government. And 3 of the documents were written by people that said, nah, the federal government's too strong. This law is too much. and opposed an increasing strength of the federal government. Okay? So I have here a list of the anti-federalist team, the team that did not support this new document called the U.S. Constitution. Team Jefferson. And they believed in the idea that states are supreme, not the central government. And that this legislative branch should be supreme. This new constitution gives the president way too much power. It's dangerous. I don't know. It gives the central government a lot of power. And then you have the Federalist team led by a man, Alexander Hamilton. He liked the idea of a strong central government. He believed that Shays' Rebellion exposed the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. And he had this interesting idea that today we look at and say, well, yeah, of course. Who decides what makes a law constitutional? Who decides? Today, I mean. Supreme Court does. We look at that and say, well, of course they do. But that's not always been the case. Jefferson actually argued, no, that the Congress should decide if a law is constitutional or not. Congress should make that decision. Hamilton said, no. The Supreme Court should. And we'll talk about that more later. Only one slide left. Isn't that fantastic? One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they needed New Hampshire. But they still needed the two big states because they were the two big states.
Is that one of the key questions?
Yeah, I think I missed that one.
Yeah,
That was one of the key questions. It was about New Hampshire and how they needed New Hampshire.
they needed New Hampshire.
North Carolina just falling through.
Well, in a way, they didn't need them, right? They didn't even need it. Do you remember? I think I showed you that map of the first election, and New York didn't even participate in the first election because they had not ratified it yet.
Yeah, Rhode
So they were not in it.
North Carolina.
Well, Rhode Island. What is it? Okay, last slide for today, and then we'll move on. What I'll call some of the, I know this is sacrilege because there are Americans who believe Jesus wrote the Constitution, riding a dinosaur on his way to church. But the Constitution is a document written by people, and people are flawed. And one of the flaws was, what about these Indians? Who are they? Are they Americans? I mean, they're in the United States. Are they citizens? And it sort of avoided that question. So the question of these Indian tribes, it was not clarified. So that was a flaw. The idea that you and I again accept today is like, well, yeah, duh. And that's the idea of checks and balances. What can be done if Congress believes that the president is acting beyond his power? What can Congress do about that? They could impeach him and then attempt to remove him. Exactly. Have we ever had a president impeached?
No.
Almost. No.
Well, okay, so you've covered the gamut. You went, yep, almost, and then no. Have we ever had a president impeached? Anyone?
No.
No? Okay, close though. We've actually had 2 impeachments,
Oh.
so we'll get there.
There was one.
There were 2 presidents impeached. Yes, there were. Clinton was impeached, and the president after Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, was impeached. But I don't think you know what impeached means. Impeached does not mean removed from office. We've never had a president removed against his will from office. One president quit, Nixon. The other 2 were impeached, but they were not removed from office. Because impeached means charged. Charged with a crime. They were both charged with a crime, they both had a trial, and they were both not removed. So we have had 2 impeached, but neither was removed. Okay? So we have all of these things where one branch gets to check the power of the other. Impeachment is the way the legislative branch checks the power of the executive branch. The Supreme Court can rule an act of Congress unconstitutional. Well, that's the way the judicial branch checks the power of the legislative branch. It's the president that names the judges to the Supreme Court. So that's the way the executive branch checks the power of the judicial branch. And they all check each other. Judges can be impeached and removed from office. So there's a way of checking from the legislature to the judicial. And they all check the power of the other. The president can veto. There's a way that the executive branch can check the power of the legislative branch. The legislative branch can override the veto. So there's a way that the legislative branch can override the executive branch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea is no one branch gets too much power. And then, so these are all sort of things that sort of limit the power of the federal government. A Bill of Rights. Remember, they promised we'll write a Bill of Rights. We will. And they did. So they immediately wrote the Constitution, and then they immediately changed the Constitution. And you might ask, why did they just do that in the first place? Good question. I don't know. So you know which amendment is the one that guarantees the right to bear arms? It's the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment. Now, it is interesting because the Second Amendment actually says that because we need to have a well-regulated militia, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Right? That's what it says. So, what's an arm? A gun. A knife? Is a knife an arm?
Yeah.
A spoon? My arms are arms, you know. A bazooka? A tank? A nuclear missile? Those are arms. So, according to the Second Amendment, you have the right to your own nuclear missile?
If you have the proper paperwork.
Right? So you understand that the words say things, but still people will look and say, well, no, you do not have the right to your own nuclear missile, which means the government can limit these things. Even if the words say, no, you can't. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Right? First Amendment, right? Guarantees you 4 freedoms. 5. Speech, religion, what? Press, assembly,
Protest.
and petition. Very good. Those are your 5. Can the government limit your speech at all?
Yeah.
Sure they can. Right? You do not have the right to open that door and scream, Potter's selling drugs again. That's speech, but the government says, no, that's lying. You can't do that. Right. There are ways to limit speech. Later on in this class, we'll study the Vietnam War. And during the Vietnam War, the New York Times got their hands on some top secret material. And they immediately published it. And the government sued the New York Times saying, you can't publish that. That's top secret. And the New York Times said, freedom of the press, First Amendment. And it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court had to weigh the New York Times' right to freedom of the press versus the government's right to fight the war. And I won't spoil the surprise. I'll tell you later what. Okay, so other things that you have the right to, and a lot of these things you have the right to because the British did not grant the right. So the reason you have the right to bear arms is because the British restricted Americans' ownership of guns. The reason that you have the right to a trial by jury is because the British required that if you were accused of violating the Sugar Act, you had to go to Canada to prove you were not guilty. You had to prove you were not guilty. Whereas here, they have to prove you're guilty. Right now, the assumption is innocent. No illegal searches. They can't search your car without cause. They can't search your house without cause. The reason they did is because the British didn't. Right? Remember the writs of assistance? They searched any American house. They had British soldiers in American houses. The reason we do it the way we do it is because the British didn't. Honestly, this is true. It's why we drive on the right. That's 100% accurate. We drive on the right because the British drove on the left. And we're not British. Drive on the right. Yeah, so every time you drive on the right, you're saying, screw you, Britain. We don't have the metric system because Americans don't get it.
Stupid.
Well, I don't want to say we're stupid, but I do remember in 2nd grade, the 2nd grade teacher saying, you have to learn this stuff because it's inevitable. Okay, still waiting on that. By the way, fun little fact, the metric system exists everywhere Napoleon successfully invaded because he was so insulted by how short he was, according to the not metric system, that it made him livid. So he wanted to invade everywhere and get the metric system so he'd be taller. Right? And does Britain have the metric system? No. Children. Okay. We're not doing this. Okay. The end.
Can you go back one page?
Can you go back one page?
I just have one more book.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. So you have the rest of the hour to, again, master your document, work on a Kia, if you so need to. I think some of you even have blue books that you're finishing up.
Can we work on our outline?
Oh, yeah, your Lexington paper? Yeah, for Lindy. Yep, that's a great idea.
Okay.
I am not collecting that. That's a Lindy thing. The only thing I'm collecting is the,
So then,
Completed
people who aren't in
paper.
Lindenberg's class, we don't have to do the.
you don't have to, but I still would. It's a good idea.
I don't know.
Are we gonna be writing the paper in here
You're having a graded paper in here.
of the Lexington thing?
That's what I was making sure.
Yes.
It was like-
Oh, definitely.
You
Absolutely.
made it sound like if we're not in that class, we're not doing that.
Oh, no, you're still doing it.
Yeah.
You're still, I have to submit it to the U. I have to show them that I'm doing these things. So, yeah.
Can I
Okay.
go bring this tray back?
Jace,
Yes.
done? Oh, wait a minute. I want to, shoot. I want to show you how to do Kia, SIRS.
Do we need an account for that?
You haven't.
Is it writing it out before?
It's so stupid. I turned it off. Oh, it's working. So in school, while you're on the grounds, there's no username and password necessary. But when you're at home, you need a username and password. I will show you what to do.
Is that thing fired up?
Huh?
Is that thing firing up? No, not.
I think it's going.
Just sounds loud.
Yeah, it's firing. It's firing up here. The engines are running. I think.
Sounds like it's fans.
Yeah. I'm probably confused.
I didn't do it. Yeah. I didn't do it. Yeah, basically.
Oh, it worked. All right, this is my recommendation for finding an article that you can quote from. You go to the internet, SKS.SIRS, SIRS.com. SKS.SIRS.com. Takes you to SIRS, which is a website that the school pays for. It's very expensive. But the reason it's worth it is because it is credible. These are vetted issues. This isn't the garbage of the internet where anybody could post anything. If there's crap, these people that work for this will get rid of it. So what you do is you can do a subject, you just type a search. You want to do, I don't know, free speech. Look at all the possible articles that are 871 newspaper articles, 42 magazine articles, 1 government document, 218 multimedia. Any of things are perfectly good synthesis articles, right? The big issue now on college campuses is students who feel like they shouldn't be exposed to people who think differently than them. So they think they have the right to chant too loudly so the speaker can't be heard by the crowd because we don't have to be exposed to your point of view. And that's a big issue these days on college campuses. Well, that's perfect. That's a perfect example of a synthesis because that addresses the idea of free speech. Well, here's an article right here from Jeff Sessions. He's the Attorney General right now. And awesome. The idea of federalism is another one. Federalism is the power of the federal government versus the power of state governments. You just type federalism. Just type federalism. 339 newspaper articles, 74 magazine articles. They're all there. And the nice thing is they're already, let's just say you're going to choose this one for some reason. If you click on the article, click on the article. There's the source, it's the Wall Street Journal. There's the date. There's the page. There's the author, Kate Davidson. And who is she? She's a writer for the Wall Street Journal. That's who she is. And then here's the whole article. And then down below is the MLA and APA citation. I still have college students telling me they still use this site because it's so easy to use. So this is where I would start if I were you. Any questions? It'll say, what's your username and password? Username is SHSLMC. Wow. She's not here. I don't think she's in this one. Are you sure?
Are you sure?
Oh. Bye. Did I ever take attendance?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Caitlin Casper?
She's not here.
Oh, right. Username, SHSLMC. That's Somerset High School Library Media Center. SHSLMC. And the password is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Crack that code, Russia. Yeah, eat it.
I'd rather not.
It's so ingenious because it's so dumb. So it's ingenious and yet dumb.
Okay.
The Russians will be like, it can't be that simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. Wrong. Okay.